Ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited today to welcome Dr. Ravi Kumar to our podcast. Dr. Kumar is a board certified neurosurgeon with training in brain and spine disorders and a very strong interest in optimizing health and rooting out the causes of chronic disease, which, as you all know, is where we spend most of our time, if not all of our time. He's also the host of Dr. Kumar Discovery Podcast, where he explores the intersection of modern medicine, ancestral wisdom, which really got my attention, Dr. Kumar, and science to help people think more clearly about their health. Dr. Kumar, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sandeep.
Welcome. Well, first of all, I want to ask about the sign behind you, because that is not just it's a very simple sign, right? It says question everything. But tell me a little bit about that sign and what does it mean to you as in your professional and personal life, if you will.
Right. Well, I went to medical school, took the traditional route through my whole career, and I'm still practicing as a neurosurgeon, as a traditional allopathic neurosurgeon. But if we just take our training and we look at the glossy pamphlets that pharmaceutical agents and equipment reps give us, and we don't question everything, we never really know the true answer to treating or the true and probabilistic ways of treating disease that end up in cures. We end up just treating disease and symptoms. And that's why I say question everything, because as soon as you start questioning, as soon as you pull that thread, a whole bunch of answers come out, a whole bunch of data comes out, a whole bunch of evidence comes out that you never knew about. And if you rely on people to give you that information, spoon feed it to you, then they're only going to give you what they want you to know. And that's just how the world works, right? I mean, all of medicine, it's a capitalistic approach in our country, at least. And it's rooted in philanthropy and improving the wellness of mankind, but it's also rooted in making money. And so if you've got two therapies, imagine you got two therapies. One sells a drug that treats a symptom, but you have to take it for the rest of your life. And the other therapy does not involve a drug and cures the disease, so it doesn't need to be treated anymore. What do you think a company who is making money off that drug are they going to give you that other information? They're not. So you got to question it yourself. And that's what I do. And I feel like it's really helped me and treat myself and my family and make us healthier. But I feel like if I can share the answers to my questions with everyone else, they'll learn that pattern and they'll be empowered with knowledge, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love it. The question everything, and I think to your point, it is sort of encompassing, right? I mean, across different areas of our life. That's the only way you're going to learn. That's the only way you're going to get better. That's the only way you're going to come up with a different approach to solve a problem or a complex set of problems is if you do question everything. I don't tell that to my kids because then I have to answer a lot of questions. But aside of that, I completely agree. But let's dive right into what our listeners and our viewers are most interested in, obviously, and we're specifically focused on metabolic health, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So we often think diabetes, it affects the heart, the kidneys, the eyes, the usual suspects, if you will, that we hear of. But from your perspective, how does it impact the brain?
Well, I mean, think about this. The brain is the most energy consumptive organ in your whole body. It weighs about 2% of your body weight and uses 20% of the energy in your body. That's incredible. Like there's no other tissue in your body that's so energy consumptive. And when you think about metabolic health, it's all about energy consumption. How do you get in and metabolize energy, and how efficiently do you do it? So there's a reason that we call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, because it's basically a syndrome of poor energy utilization. So if you have poor metabolic health, you're going to have poor neurological health. It's just the two are just tied intrinsically together.
So that's very interesting. I had heard the term type 3 diabetes in the past, but in hearing from someone from like you speak about that, pull that thread a little bit more. Tell our listeners a little bit more when you say people. It's not a term that everybody knows, right? Everybody knows type
Right.
1, type 2, pre-diabetes, but type 3 diabetes specifically because, as you said, it is Alzheimer's, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
is a secondary term. So tell me a little bit more about that. That our viewers should know about
Yeah.
specifically as it
Yeah.
relates to that.
Okay. Well, let me just tell you this first. If you have prediabetes, which is the before you're metabolically unhealthy, but you haven't developed type 2 diabetes yet, your chance of developing Alzheimer's is 50% higher than someone who is
Wow.
metabolically healthy. Yeah. If you have type 2 diabetes, your chance of developing Alzheimer's is 2x. So 200 or 100% increase in developing diabetes, or sorry, in developing Alzheimer's if you have type 2 diabetes. And the reason is because you're becoming insulin resistant in your brain, essentially. So, what is insulin resistance? Well, it's where your cells are not able to bring glucose into the cell because the amount of these GLUT4 receptors is downregulated, and basically you have to drive higher glucose levels to get the amount of energy into the cells that you
Mm.
need. So we just talked about how the brain is so energy consumptive. So imagine now they can't get glucose into their cells properly because they're insulin resistant. Well, they end up in this basically starvation state. And what does that lead to? Decreased amount of synapses, which is the synapses are the way the neurons connect and communicate with each other. It increased neuronal death, decreased neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is this ability to make and basically create new neurological pathways in your brain. All these things that we need to do to learn and thrive in this world, those end up being starved out because you can't get energy into your brain cells. So that's
Mm.
why having optimal metabolic health, which increases insulin sensitivity, leads to increased neuronal health, basically, and reduced rates of neurodegenerative disease.
Man, that's scary. I mean,
Yeah,
something that starts in the gut, something that starts with the metabolic health, right? And the simplest of um, and the most mundane tasks, right? Eating healthy, or
yeah,
exercising, movement, as we think about contributing to the overall metabolic health and the impact of it overall. Obviously, as I said, people focus primarily on eyes, kidney, liver, so on and so forth. But this, if your cognitive decline is rapid, all these other things are, I mean, who
yeah.
cares, right? I mean, if you can't function in that manner, I think that's a really big warning. So would you say that that's probably the most surprising brain related impact of poor metabolic health that people just don't talk about enough, just don't know
Yeah.
about enough?
No one knows about it. I mean,
Mm.
even many doctors don't know about it, I mean, because when you go in and if you've got poor metabolic health, you've got, insulin resistance or you're pre-diabetic and or type 2 diabetic, no doctor is telling their patients, well, you might develop Alzheimer's unless you get your metabolic health in alignment. They're usually talking about heart health and kidney health, like you're talking about. But yeah, the brain is more energy consumptive than all those other organs.
Mm. Mm.
And what's happening is if you're metabolically unhealthy throughout your life, your 30s, 40s, 50s, you're silently destroying irreplaceable real estate in your brain that's going to come back and cause you problems later on in life. Not that you can't do anything about it at that point. And once you start developing cognitive impairment, you can,
Mm.
but it's really important to maintain optimal metabolic health during your most viable years, your most productive years, so that you can have a healthy brain later in life when you're retiring and enjoying things. So yeah, I think that it's not well known, and it
Yeah.
it needs to be better understood, because we've one metabolic health and metabolic disease is completely modifiable even without drugs. I mean, you can This is not something that if you have metabolic disease or you have type 2 diabetes, that's your destiny. There's nothing you can do about it. You got to take a medication for your rest of your life. That's what you hear when you go to your doctor. You got to go on metformin or you got to go on this GLP-1, and you can never come off because then it's going to happen again. That's not true. Actually, you don't need any of those drugs. They can help if you're deep in the metabolic hole, but you don't need them. It is built into your evolutionary history and your DNA that you have everything you need to be metabolically healthy without drugs. Movement, sunshine, sleep, de-stressing your life. I mean, all these things put our biology in alignment, and you start running on all cylinders as soon as you do that. And that leads to better brain health, better heart health, better kidney health. So yeah, this is a holistic view of how to basically live and be better, and it affects all parts of your life, especially your brain.
You know, and I'll touch. We'll touch back on the therapeutic side of it. The whole, the drug sort of protocol that's been around and that continues to be, I guess, propagated more and more now with the GLP-1 drugs. I'll come back to that. But if we look, I mean, obviously you talked about Alzheimer's. It's a very serious complication. I think that once you get there, the neurodegeneration, I guess, is accelerated, and there's bigger problems, and it's a rapid decline. But when we look at simple daily nuisances, if you will, simple daily disruptions like brain fog, mood swings, forgetfulness. As I said that with a little fumble in my voice, could these also be linked to blood sugar issues, or what you were talking about a little bit about insulin sensitivity?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's something that precedes neurodegeneration, and it's called mild cognitive impairment. And it's basically where you have this impairment of your optimal cognition that's not basically interfering with your functional life. So you can still take your kids to school and do your job and do your taxes and all that stuff. You can still do that, but you're forgetting things that you never forgot when you were in your 20s and 30s. Or this math problem or this complex puzzle that you could do no problem before, it's more difficult. That's mild cognitive impairment. And about 15-20% of those cases proceed to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia. So that's why when you start to notice these things, you should start to think, hey, maybe I'm not optimizing energy utilization in my brain because I'm metabolically not healthy. And that's the perfect time to intervene, because it's like, hey, this flag that's telling you ahead of time before you fall into the hole, saying, hey, listen, this is going on, work on this. And you can get out of it. You can set proper diet and lifestyle behaviors that guide you down a totally different road that doesn't lead to Alzheimer's.
Got it. That's a great point. Now, you might have, and I think you touched upon this in some of your earlier comments and discussion. But if I'm off the street and I'm just asking you a question, I meet you for the first time, and just a very straightforward question that, hey, doc, what happens in the brain when blood sugar levels are consistently high? The direct answer to that would be,
yeah, well, if blood sugar levels are high in your brain, they're high in your body, because there's this thing called the blood-brain barrier, but that's outside the blood. So the same blood that circulates through the rest of your body circulates through your brain. And the reason glucose would be high is because you're insulin sensitive. Insulin resistant. You're not getting glucose into your cells properly, so it's accumulating in higher levels in the blood. Now, what happens when glucose levels are high in the brain? Well, I mean, that means your brain is probably not getting the energy it needs, because instead of being in the brain cells, the neurons and the astrocytes and all these supportive cells in the brain, they're in the blood. And so what happens is you start developing this state of starvation. and neurons degenerate, synapses recede, plasticity goes down, BDNF, which is this molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it drops. You start getting brain atrophy, real actual visible brain atrophy on MRIs. So that's what happens when you have high blood sugar levels. The other thing that happens is that glucose is reactive. Like if you're not burning it for fuel in your mitochondria, and inside your cell cytoplasm of your cells, it starts sticking to things. And so it's called it's basically called agglutination. Basically, it sticks to things, and when it sticks to things like cell surfaces, proteins, it creates inflammation. And so that inflammation happens in the brain as well, because glucose starts sticking to structures around the brain, and you get this neuroinflammation that leads to depression and forgetfulness and brain fog. That's why you measure metabolic health oftentimes with hemoglobin A1C. We can see how much glucose is stuck to the red blood cells. And that's what's that measure. That's measuring the percentage of red blood cells that have these advanced glycation end products. So, that's basically, if you have high glucose in your body, you have high glucose in your brain, and that your brain is likely resistant to glucose entering the cells because it's resistant to insulin, and you're getting this neuroinflammation and starvation.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Excuse me. It's people still, most patients, most humans, they still have a very fundamental, the big fundamental gap and in lack of understanding of the difference between blood glucose and HbA1c, right? And the way you explained that, and as we were building out, our protocols, as we were working on our large language models, to obviously from an education perspective too, it was so easy to understand once you got that amount of glucose stuck to your red blood cells. That is what hemoglobin A1C is sort of measuring. And that's the indicator, that's the marker that you want to focus on. That's why they measure it, right? But a lot of people still have a hard time understanding, well, what's the difference between those two. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was something that we hear quite often from people. Now, so what are some early, I know we talked about this, but what are some of the early neurological signs that someone should keep in mind to see if their metabolic health might be off?
Yeah. So basically, this whole cloud or area, it's a gray area of mild cognitive impairment, can present in a number of ways. You could be forgetting things. You could feel brain fog. You can feel late life depression. I mean, even guys you're in my age, we can start getting down, and that's a sign that metabolically we're not healthy in our brains, because that kind of mood regulation is in our brains. It's in our guts too, and it's in our bodies, but the basically neurons that control your mood are in your brain. You might fall into these deep tunnel visioned periods in your life where you can't focus on anything else. You can only focus on one thing. That's another sign that you're just not methylating right. You're not utilizing energy right in your brain. So there's a number of things that you could notice, but when it comes to metabolic health, you can look in the mirror, honestly, Sandeep. You can take off your clothes. You can look in the mirror. If you have truncal obesity, there's a good chance that you have fat in your peritoneal cavity. That's that cavity that wraps all these organs in your body. Okay. And that is one of the key drivers of insulin resistance, because it releases estrogen and some other inflammatory cytokines that basically make the cells resistant to insulin. It makes the cells think there's some problem, we're in danger, let's conserve energy. So don't use that glucose, store it as fat. And that's essentially what insulin resistance is. So you can look at your muscle mass. I mean, you know what you looked like when you were 28, And so
Damn it, why do you got to remind me?
So take off your clothes and look in the mirror. How much muscle mass do you have? Are you like that anymore? And if you're not, then you can build that muscle mass likely through, hormonal optimization and resistance training, which we don't do as much of as we do when we're young. Even if we were never actively lifting weights when we're young, you're you're you don't feel limitations as a young man. You're doing or a young woman, you're doing all these things that likely you're pulling back from as an older person. So you can look at your body. You can look at the health of your connective tissue. You can look at your bowel habits. You can look at your plate, you know? I mean, even though we're gaining weight in older age, we're often eating less. I mean,
Mm.
when you were 28, you pick up a big pile of rice and go to town, and that was nothing. You were hungry like a few hours later, and your blood glucose level was likely normal too, because all that sugar from all that rice, it got sucked into your muscles so quickly, which muscles are very metabolically hungry, by the way, for glucose. And it got sucked into your muscles so quickly that you were at a normal glucose level. You weren't hypoglycemic, you weren't hyperglycemic, you were just ready to go and ready to use your muscles and your brain and all the vitality you have with youth. Well, that's not something that is being kept from you in older age. You can have that again, but you have to modify your body, diet, lifestyle, and just a bit different perspective on life. You know, I think another key approach as well is hormonal optimization. It doesn't have to be with hormone replacement therapy, although for most women it may play a role. But
Yeah.
men and women modifying or optimizing your hormones to that of your younger self helps with metabolic health as well.
Got it. Now, why? So, given that, given that there's a lot of similarities, and you talked about brain fog, you talked about forgetfulness, things like that. There's a lot. There are a lot of other situations or other parts of our life where that can happen as well. For the those factors can come in. Why do you think people ignore these early signals? Is it because they just don't care, or is it more, man, it could be something else? It can't really be serious. I mean,
Yeah.
I forgot something. Big deal, right? Why do you think people ignore these early signs?
Well, yeah, first they don't know that it's a harbinger
Mm,
of later problems. And your doctors don't either. Your doctors don't know it either because otherwise they'd be telling you, be like, "Ooh, are you forgetting things? Are you not able to basically do these solve these problems or these puzzles in your life like you were before? Are you lower energy? Are you not, basically performing the actions that seemed effortlessly to you before because now they're very difficult? Those those are all like harbingers of this metabolic inefficiency that people often fall into with poor metabolic health. And so why isn't your doctor asking about that? Well, because it's too hard, honestly, to go
mm,
so in depth on a person and treat them and figure all their problems out in 15 minutes. It's way easier to just write a script for metformin or write a script for a statin. Give it to them, move on. That's just how our medical system's built.
yeah.
So the patients don't know. The doctors don't know or just don't have the time. And we end up basically going through life with this ticking time bomb of insulin resistance that's building and creating a vicious cycle on itself. And it's completely curable. That's the thing. I mean, it's curable without medication. So, yeah, I think that's why people kind of push off not just the brain fog and all that, but they're pushing off the fact that they're developing truncal obesity. They're getting skin tags all over their necks. That's a sign of insulin resistance. They don't have the energy they had before. They can't
Mm,
lift what they could before. Before, you come in with, two jugs of milk in each hand and bags on your arms and no problem. You just do it. Now you're like, I'm gonna do them one at a time. You know,
yeah.
you're just not, and not that's not how people are meant to age. Honestly, that's how we age now, but that's not how we were meant to age. I mean, if you look at ancestral societies, or these traditional societies that likely reflect what our ancestors looked like. At 70, 80, they're still freaking walking
Yeah.
through thick mud in the rice paddies doing like heavy work.
Yeah.
I mean, my father's village in southern India, you go there and it still looks like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 70, 80-year-old men walking behind bullocks, pulling plows and walking through this thick of mud all day.
Yeah.
And then they eat some like dry soaked rice once in the day,
Yeah.
and maybe a meal in the evening, and a couple cups of tea. And that's they're consuming way less calories than we do, but then they're utilizing those calories way more efficiently, you know, and and usually they smoke like chimneys, and like they do all these things that we think, oh, that's the problem. Well, yeah, those are problematic, but our food is the biggest problem. Our
Yeah.
food and our lifestyle are the biggest problems.
It's very interesting. You talked a little bit about you mentioned about the ancestral wisdom, and let's pull the thread on that. I don't know if you've had a chance to. I'm a big believer in that. We travel all around the world, my wife and I, and the kids. And the more we've traveled to parts of the world that are either old traditions, like when you go to India, for example, or which is where I grew up, or you go to Japan. We were in Japan and South Korea this past summer. You go to these smaller countries in Latin America, right? You go to Costa Rica and Ecuador and places like that. You still see a lot of what you just talked about, where older people, and when I look at them, man, I'm envious because I'm 40, 46 years old. And when I look at those that are 80, 82, 83, and they're still out for a walk and they're playing with their grandkids and they're running around, and you find out that they are at that age, you're like, man, the way I'm going, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that when I'm 82 years old.
Yeah.
So and to your point, they do have that the wine. They will have a couple glasses of wine almost every night. They do smoke, but they're healthy as an ox, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of those older habits that have been built in from the food purity as well as the movement side of it.
Yeah.
And I guess at a certain age, you just stop caring anyway. So the stress levels are low because you're like, what
Yeah.
the hell am I going to do with this stress? So
Yeah.
there's something to be said about that.
For sure. And you just mentioned stress. I mean, that's not something we've really talked about this podcast, but
Yeah.
that has a huge impact on our metabolic health. And that's one of the hardest ones to control, right?
Mm,
Because I mean, you got to support your family. You're worrying about all your kids' problems. You're worrying about your finances. You've got you know financial issues and all. I mean, there's so many things that can affect our stress levels. Which, in a man and a woman, stress causes hormonal disruption. It causes gut microbiome disruption. It causes neurological uh, problems. Because when you're stressed out, you just don't work on all cylinders. And then it also leads to insulin resistance, elevated chronic cortisol secretion. So that is one thing that is when people ask me, well, how do I get my metabolic health in order? I'm chronically stressed out. That's probably your biggest lever right there. I mean, you should eat healthy and you should exercise and
right.
you should
Right.
do all these things. But your biggest lever is going to be figuring out how to reduce your stress levels. And that can be very difficult, but
Mm,
it's still doable. And I'll
yeah.
give you an example. I found myself in that situation. I was burnt out as a neurosurgeon. I was unhealthy. I was stressed out. I had been working at that point. I'd been working 11 years, 80 to 100 hours per week, and it was killing me. And how was I going to get out of this situation? We took a huge step. We sold everything we owned. We took our 4 kids and our dog, and we moved to India for a year of sabbatical. I actually worked in mission hospitals and did neurosurgery there still, but we hit a huge reset button on my life, on our lives, and it totally helped me from a metabolic standpoint. I became much healthier. I was, overweight, and I was I was getting gray hair. My hair's all black now again. It's like all these things just basically uh, got better with de-stressing. And so
Wow.
that's a big lever you can pull. Often it comes with financial harm. It comes with productivity harm. But in the end, if you think about it, I mean, having money and having progress doesn't matter if you're miserable.
Yeah.
And so it,
Yeah.
it can be, in the long run, it can be a huge step to improving the quality of your life. And that's
Yeah.
not something anyone will talk about either. Your doctor won't say, "Hey, quit your job and move to India," which you don't have to do. But like, still, I
Yeah.
mean, that is something that, I often tell people: hit the reset button,
Yeah.
figure out some way to get out of this rut that you're driving into a new path that leads you to a less stressful life.
How old were your kids at that time when you did that?
I had 16, actually 15, 13, 11, and 10.
So
12 and 10.
did they
Yeah.
just go to school there, or
Yeah,
they're
we
just
put
like,
them
you
in
know what?
Indian school. It was an international school, so they spoke in
Yeah.
English there. But yeah, it was wild. They were pretty ticked off about it.
Yeah.
Now they say, "Hey, Baba, that was a good idea. Thanks for doing that."
Yeah.
But back then they were just ticked off. And we put them in an international school. We rented a house. We brought our dog to India, which was, that in itself was a massive um,
I
undertaking. And we came back with another dog too, by the way. So
I can imagine my kids. So we have a 2.5-year-old pit bull boxer mix, and if I even recommended that we should move somewhere without Millie, man, I would have two less
oh
kids in the
yeah.
house. They would just walk away. It's like,
Oh,
no,
I know.
we're taking
I
the
know.
dog, or we're not
You-
going. So, I
so
got it.
yeah, I think that, finding and it doesn't, and I'm not telling your audience, listen, quit your job and move out of the country. I'm not telling them that. I'm
Yeah,
saying figure out what can dramatically change your life for the better. It might be um, changing your job. It might be moving into a new house. It might be joining just a new social group.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, there's so many things that you can do, and you can do meditation and all that. And I strongly recommend it. But if you've built a life on a infrastructure that is like just basically not viable for a low stress life, you gotta tear it down.
yeah. It's very interesting hearing you speak about the importance of stress and what it does. When we were building out Healed, and I think I mentioned to you that our focus was, let's build something that is tech enabled but human led. One of the roles that we specifically focused on was behavioral coaches, because we realized that at the end of the day, I can give you all the recommendations about, you should eat salad, you should eat broccoli, you should go for a 3 mile walk every day, you should breathe in, breathe out, go in the sun, and all that. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to control the daily stressors of your life, and how do you manage that, how do you work with that, how do you work around it, none of this works, right? So it is amazing, has the feedback that we have gotten from our patients, from our members. For example, we have, well, the CIO for Signature Healthcare up in Brockton, Massachusetts. His name is Joe Diver, and um, Joe's been in healthcare for 25, 30 years, something like that, because obviously he's moved up to the rank to where he is right now, and he's great. He's great at what he does, but he's also got the years under him, the experience. And Joe made this statement on in public that the last time I received this much care to help me from a stress perspective was when my doctors cared for me when my daughter was born and she was in NICU 25 years ago. So the care team that we have brought to the front, where our behavioral coaches are looking at the blood glucose data, because we're getting it from CGMs and all that, and they're looking at heart rate variability data and the sleep cycles.
Mhm.
That's when they're talking to the patients to go, hey, wait a second. Over the last 2 weeks, we're noticing a pattern of elevated heart rate variability, and we're looking at the sleep patterns being disrupted, and we're seeing midnight snacking, and we're seeing blood glucose spikes. Talk to me about what's going on in your life. And then more often than not, you find out the things that you mentioned, like be it the, hey, my kid's struggling in school, or we're having to move, or my job is being difficult, whatever the case might be. Then the behavioral coaches go, hey, all right, let's work on how do you deal with those life situations, rather than me giving you a lecture on, you know what, you should really have a salad for lunch tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, dude, sure, I can have the salad, but my stress didn't go away after the salad either, right? So
Right.
how do I deal with that? And we're seeing a massive improvement
Yeah.
in people's insulin response and blood glucose levels because of that one small support that we provide in talking to a human being that is non-judgmental, that is just saying, hey, I'm here to listen, and I'm here to give you some advice on what we call pockets of control. When do you take away the devices? When do you put them away? When is the optimal time to go for a walk? Where do you do breathing exercise? How do you meditate? How do you deal with the weekend temptations of going out or staying up late, all that. So
Yeah.
we've seen a massive change in our patients because of that.
That's awesome. I think that's great. And that's not something that anyone else does in the medical field. I mean,
Yeah.
if you, and maybe you have a really open-minded, holistic doctor that works on that stuff, but for the most part, that's not how it works. So that's awesome. And that is a huge lever that you can pull.
Yeah, we are, and we love it. We love our behavioral coaches. They really they do some great work. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. I want to deal with therapeutics, right? We talked
Okay.
about uh, the allopathic side, the metformins and the
Mhm.
GLP-1s. Obviously, GLP-1s are the big craze right now,
Yeah.
and I wanna hear your thoughts. I want to hear sort of any research that you've come across, specific when it comes to brain health or in general metabolic health
Mhm.
and the relation. Because our approach or our thought is this: is that there are patients that need the support of a GLP-1 drug, and I think they should get it immediately. They should go for it
Yeah.
in the supervision of their doctors and get that help. But a lot of people are relying on that as the first step and say, you know what,
Yeah.
I don't need to change my habits.
Mhm.
I just need to pop in the GLP-1, whatever brand they choose to go with, and be done with that.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a lot of science that hasn't been proven about side effects, long-term
Mhm.
impact. uh, is it lifetime prescription or is it limited
Mhm.
prescription? I mean, we don't
Yeah.
know, right? So I wanted to hear in your mind, if somebody were to ask you and say, hey, I got to lose 30 pounds, or yeah, I just got pre-diabetes and I'm going to go on brand X of GLP-1. What is your feedback to them?
Yeah. Well, first I would tell them that, listen, you have everything already coded into your own DNA to lose that 30 pounds. It's already there. You just have to do the work. And doing work is hard. That's why people often just go for a drug. They're like, give me this injection. And I just wanted to do it for me, and pretty soon these GLP-1s are going to have more effective oral formulations. In fact, they're in
Mhm.
phase 3 clinical trials right now. And so it'll get easier and easier to just take a pill. And with these GLP-1s, first of all, let me just say this: GLP-1, which stands for glucagon like peptide 1, is made by your body. It's made by your body. It's cut out of the same protein segment that you cut out glucagon. It's another piece of it, and it's something part of a group of molecules called incretins. And what they do is they basically increase insulin when your glucose is high, but they don't increase insulin release when your glucose is low. So you can't get hypoglycemia, or it's very rare to get hypoglycemia. They also slow gastric emptying. So a lot of
Mm.
people get kind of heartburn or nausea on GLP-1s, but you also get full easy. So you eat a little bit, it doesn't empty, your stomach doesn't empty, and so you feel full and you stop eating. It also goes up to the hypothalamus, which is and the brainstem, which are parts of your brain, and it kind of hits these satiation centers. So it makes you feel like you're full. It takes away that desire to eat, essentially. All right. So that's what GLP-1s do. They're fairly safe, but they're not necessary for everyone. Some people need
Mm.
them. They're so deep in the metabolic hole. They're so obese, and the basically the barrier that they have to climb to get into
Mm.
positive metabolic health or good metabolic health is so high that a GLP-1 can be a salvation in that situation. Okay. So this is what happens with GLP-1s and why they're not a sustainable fix right now. Almost everyone who goes on a GLP-1 eventually comes off. They can't tolerate the cost. They can't tolerate the side effects. They weight plateau and they get sick of getting an injection every week. Those things might change as we get oral versions, we get generic versions and whatnot. But almost everyone comes off. And as soon as they come off, they gain all the weight back, all of it. So this is what I tell patients. I say, first, if you can manage your metabolic health with diet and lifestyle, getting good sleep, eating proper food, getting exercise, getting sunshine, de-stressing, then do that. Because one, it is got all the benefits, none of the side effects. In fact, you get healthier. You don't get less healthy. And if you can do it, do it. If you can't, okay, then GLP-1s can serve a purpose. And this is how I would do it. You start with a low dose and you basically escalate slowly. There's even some companies out there who are using level-based dosing where they look at the levels of GLP-1 based on pharmacokinetic curves, and then they dose based on that. But right now, the common practice is start high and go up quicker, and it's a recipe for failure, okay? One of the side effects with GLP-1s is muscle loss. In fact, 40% of the muscle of the weight loss that you have on a GLP-1, which can be significant, is muscle. And that's bad, Sandeep. You don't want to lose muscle because muscle is one of your most important organ in your body for maintaining insulin sensitivity. Okay. So not that you being on a GLP-1 makes you insulin resistant because you're losing muscle. Actually, you're becoming insulin sensitive. But as soon as you go off that GLP-1 and you're at a lower muscle mass state, you become much more resistant. And that's why you gain weight so quickly. So I say, if you're going to be on a GLP-1, like I said, start low, go slow. Also increase your protein intake. You should be getting around 2 grams per lean kilogram of body weight of protein per day. And you should be resistance training every day. On top of that, you need to optimize your diet and lifestyle. I mean, we're talking exercise in healthy diet, because the GLP-1 in your mind, if you're going to go on it, should be used as a bridge to help you make the sustainable life changes, lose some weight, so that when you eventually come off this GLP-1, which it will likely happen, you've built a healthy infrastructure of diet and lifestyle and behavior that keeps you healthy after you come off the GLP-1. But that's not how most people do it, right?
Yeah.
They start high, they escalate the dose very quickly because that's what makes the most money for the companies. And they get sick, they come off of it after, a month or a year or 2 years, and then they go right back into metabolic disequilibrium or poor balance in metabolic health. And so you can't be on a GLP-1, eat, 4 Oreos a day and, a couple sandwiches, and you're at a calorie deficit, but you're eating horribly, and then expect to be healthy afterwards. So that's my take on GLP-1s. Honestly, they're exciting. Yeah. Most people fail them. So if you're going to use it as a tool to get yourself into the right metabolic track.
That's incredible. I think I read this somewhere. Actually, I was doing some deep thinking work the other day, and I was making some notes. And the way we saw it was, or the way I thought of it was that GLP, to what you just said, GLP-1s buy you the time, right? You still got to figure out how best to make of that time, right? If you're still gonna learn, if you're not gonna learn the good habits, it ain't gonna make one bit of difference. To your point, you're gonna have to come off at some point. And if you're planning on it to be a lifetime, again, your body is going to become just like any other medication. Your body is going to start becoming resistant at that dose. Then you got to up the dose. Then it becomes resistant at that dose. Then you got to up the dose more. So there's only a finite point you can go to. And Another interesting thing, we kept hearing this from our members, that they were actually getting off GLP-1s after they got on our program because they learned that metabolic health protocols, the right lifestyle. But we said we do want to help people understand you said it, as you said, it is produced in your body automatically. Your body produces those hormones, right? So what we did was we used tech and science to our advantage in this one. We created this attribute called fullness score within our app. So anytime you eat a meal, you when you take a picture of to track it, it gives you what we call the wellness whisper. There's a category called wellness whisper. When you click on that, it shows you the fullness score of the meal that you're about to eat. Now, what that fullness score does is red, yellow, green signaling that says, hey, if you're eating, to your point, if you're eating a sandwich or 4 Oreo cookies, it's going to be in the red. Now, bro, you're going to be hungry again in very little time. The more it goes towards the green, the longer you're going to stay full. So now you're making decisions based on, hey, your body is going to respond to the meal you're eating naturally, but we want to educate you by building the habit to say, man, every time I eat something, if I eat salad with salmon, for example, or grilled chicken, my fullness score is high and I don't get hungry for about 5 hours. But every time I've eaten this, now my fullness score is lower and I am getting hungrier faster and faster. So we're trying to incorporate that within to educate the people to say, you can eat what you want, but be educated about what you're eating. So you are making the decision on your own. You're empowered, you're educated, and you're enabled to make that decision. But so far, people don't get that information. And I think we're trying to change that too. But it is very important, as you said, that, hey, if you need it, go take it. It can be a lifesaver, right?
Yeah,
But it should not be a lifeboat every single time you want to lose a few pounds.
exactly.
Um, so, Dr. Kumar, I know we've talked a lot about the science, the impact, the long term, the short term, the brain fog, and all that. But what is some practical advice that you can give to our listeners that can start not just correlating, but that they can start changing tangible actions that they can take right now to
Mhm.
start on a better path for better metabolic health and brain health long term?
Yeah. Well, so I have these. I There are a number of things you can do, obviously,
Mm.
but I think the big three that you could do right now that would make a massive difference are diet and lifestyle, sleep, and social connection. Those are probably the three most impactful, modifiable things that you can start doing today. So, one, diet and lifestyle. You should be eating a whole food diet that aligns with your ancestral heritage. So, for you and me, we look at our great grandparents in India and they were lean and they may have been vegetarian. They weren't eating any seed oils. I mean, they were eating like ghee and things like that. And they were optimally metabolically healthy. They might have had problems with infection and the other things and trauma back then that caused big problems. But we don't eat like them anymore, likely, but we can try to. And it will almost, no matter what your ancestral heritage, it'll almost always be a whole food diet,
Mm.
meaning no refined foods and healthy fats. Okay. So that's one thing. You can eat healthy. If anyone's not sure how to do that, I'd say just default to the Mediterranean diet because that's got the most research and it's a whole food, high fat diet
Yeah.
with healthy fat, right? Monounsaturated fats from olive oil. One thing we didn't mention, and I tell everyone to avoid, and I've got tons of stories about this one, is seed oils, which are vegetable oils from soy, canola, corn, cottonseed. Those are highly polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acids that create a firestorm of inflammation in your body on purpose because they were designed for that. That's how we regulate inflammation. And our ancestors took about zero 0.6 grams of omega-6 fatty acids per day. Now we take a cup of it and pour it in our brownie
Oh
mix.
my God, yes.
Yeah. And so this creates I think it's at the root of a lot of metabolic problems, including vascular disease. So, and none of our ancestors ever had it
Mm.
because it was it's basically there's very little oil in soy and corn. But when you use an industrial process using hexane and other solvents to basically pull the oils out of these massive amounts of industrial product from the farm fields, you can get bottles of yellow Wesson, or vegetable oil. And so none of our ancestors ever had access to that. We do now. It's on every every grocery store aisle, and it's in our pantry. Hopefully not, but it may be in your pantry. So stay away from the seed oils. Saturated fats are safe and healthy. They don't oxidize. Monounsaturated fats are safe and healthy. They don't oxidize. That's butter, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and if you eat meat, lard and tallow. So those are the healthy fats that should be in your metabolic diet. Okay. Exercise. You got to exercise. 150 minutes per week of walking increases your hippocampal size by 2%. Okay. That's the hippocampus is this organ in your brain that stores your short-term memories into long-term memories. And basically you should be exercising every day. So that's a little over 20 minutes per day it doesn't have to be vigorous. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Just get out there and move your body. Your body was meant to move, and it directly affects the perfusion and the synaptogenesis and the neurogenesis in your brain. So move your body. So that's diet and lifestyle. That will improve your metabolic health and all sorts of other things. Okay. The second one is sleep. You need at least 7 hours of sleep. Okay. If you're younger, you might need more. Sleep is when you basically, there's something called the glymphatic system. And it is this basically where you pulse CSF through your brain to wash out all the metabolic waste. And those include beta amyloid plaques, which are implicated in Alzheimer's. So you need to sleep to get that process to happen. Okay. And by the way, I said CSF. CSF stands for cerebral spinal fluid. It's a fluid that bathes our brain and spinal cord. So you have to sleep to empty the waste out of your brain. And then the third one is social connection. Okay. Social connection, we don't talk about it, but it is one of the most important aspects of neurological health. So you need, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go socialize with tons of people. You just need to have touch points throughout your day where you interact with other human beings on a meaningful level. Okay. And this is encoded into our DNA as human beings. We are social creatures. We're not creatures that live in isolation. We are creatures that live and thrive on social connection. And when we don't get it, our metabolic health deteriorates, our cardiovascular health deteriorates, and our neurological health deteriorates. So get social connection. So those are the big three. After that, you need to basically, one, you have to make sure you're controlling your blood pressure. Hypertension leads to vascular disease, which leads to neurodegeneration. So control your blood pressure. A lot of times that alone is weight loss is enough.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to watch your sodium and you have to take an antihypertensive. If you have to take those to get to your end result that is basically a normal blood pressure, then do it. Do it. You got to do it. And if you have any hearing loss, and this is one that most people don't hear. If you have any hearing loss, you need to get hearing aids. Okay? Because if you have severe hearing loss, you can have 500% increase in Alzheimer's rate. Wow. When the brain is not receiving auditory input, it starts deteriorating. Yeah. So if you have, even mild or moderate hearing loss leads to neurodegeneration very abruptly and very quickly. So, and if you put hearing aids back in, you start restoring that input, then things improve. But if you have any hearing loss, if your wife's telling you, hey, why didn't you hear me? Or that's not what I said, you need to get checked. It's very easy to check for sensorineural hearing loss. Okay. Your doctor can order it and it'll be done within a week. And if you've got hearing loss, get hearing aids. They got new ones that it's very hard to see and they're affordable now. They used to be very expensive. Just fix any hearing loss. That's very important. And the last stuff I would say is there are some supplements that are very important for neurological health, One is vitamin D. If you're hypovitamin D, so meaning you're basically 25 hydroxy vitamin D level, which is what your doctor will check, is below, I think it's 20 nanograms per milliliter, then there's no way for you to have good neurological health. In fact, and it doesn't matter if you're in a sunny place. I mean, my party, who is my grandmother in India, she was living basically 10 degrees north of the equator, and her vitamin D level was 8, and she was morbidly depressed. As soon as we improved that, she was back to neurological normalcy. So get your vitamin D level checked. You should be up in the 30 to 50 nanograms per deciliter range. That's what our ancestors had, and that's like a normal range. Don't settle for just above, the bottom range, which is 20. You want to be up in the middle of the range. And that's, you can't be happy. You can't be neurologically normal without a normal vitamin D level. I'm telling you this right now. It's impossible. And low vitamin D levels are an epidemic in the world. A lot of people have them and they don't even know. And as soon as they improve it, man, their whole life transforms.
Yeah.
Omega-3 fatty acids are another important one. You need to get a good, high quality omega-3 fatty acid, and basically take it on a regular basis, or you need to eat sustainable low mercury seafood at some point. Okay. And then the last thing that I tell everybody is creatine is an amazing supplement with almost no risk to health risks at all. It is, and what it does is it shuttles energy in your brain and in all the cells in your body and helps you restore energy metabolism when it might be being hurt by poor metabolic health. So those are the things that I tell people. If you want to have a healthy brain, try these things. The top 3 are diet and lifestyle, sleep, and social connection. The big bad guys are hypertension and sensorineural hearing loss. And then the supplements are omega-3 fatty acids. What did I say? Omega-3 fatty acids, creatine, and what was the third one?
Vitamin D.
And vitamin D. Okay. And the 3.
I was paying attention.
Yeah. And the 3 supplements are vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and creatine. If you take care of all those things, you're likely going to be in optimal neurological shape. So that's my advice to you folks.
That is fantastic. There you have it, folks. Dr. Kumar's recommendations, and these are easy ones to follow for the most part. I mean, you don't have to go out and make big investments or go buy expensive gym equipment and things like that. Just basic fundamental movement, eat healthy, and vitamin D. There's plenty of that available outside my window right now too. So there's I'm sure you can put these to use. Dr. Kumar, this has been fantastic, and I want people to follow you, to continue the conversation. Tell them a little bit where they can find you. How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's called the Dr. Kumar Discovery. It's where I go and discover all these things about health and wellness and share it with everybody. Just search it on any major platform, the Dr. Kumar Discovery, and it'll come up. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm all over the place and ready to share information. And you can email me if you have questions at drkumar@drkumardiscovery.com. So I'll send all that information to you, Sandeep, and you can put it in the show notes.
Perfect. This has been incredible. Dr. Kumar, thank you so much for your time. I truly enjoyed talking to you. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.